Welcome Amit Vadva to You and Your Business Studio. Hi, Amit.
Hi, Alec. Thank you for having me today.
Delighted to have you on technical and all that. I'm sure our audience will be delighted to hear some of the things you have to share with us. But again, as I say, I take all of my guests to their last year in school, find out, are they technically minded? Are they going to run off around the world and find themselves, or had you got a plan in place?
I had a sort of a plan because during my teen years, I had the great fortune in the early 90s to travel to Ireland a few times from India. So all
Right.
that exposure to, all things mechanical, be it the planes or the airplanes or airports. Yeah, I wanted to be an engineer. And when I didn't get into engineering in India, I decided to pack up my bags and come here. Thankfully, my family agreed to pay for my education, so I did my leaving cert in the Institute of Education in '96.
All right, fantastic. What part of India are you originally from, Amit?
I'm from Delhi, so I
Oh,
moved from
Delhi.
one capital to another.
Fantastic. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so you were getting backwards and forwards. I'm sure your parents had great expectations around the results, so shoulder to the wheel, as they say here.
Yes, or pedal to the metal during second
Yeah,
year.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It does add a lot of pressure when somebody's paying the fees and you're so far away, almost 5,000 miles away from home. And I'm also the first. I was also the first person in my family to go abroad to study,
All right.
so lots of familial pressure. But
Mm-hmm.
I got into engineering in UCD in '97, so
Well,
uh,
congratulations
the
on that.
journey
That's
began.
a Yeah, that's a tough one. How did you find it? It must have been a bit of a cultural shock, never mind anything else, to come to a country like Ireland.
Well, actually, Alec, I had done 1 year of schooling when I was 8 or 9 in Ireland, in Dublin.
Yeah,
I
sure.
have some family here, so I guess that's where my love affair with Ireland began, and that's why when I got the chance at 18, I jumped at it and came over. Um, so and luckily I had always studied everything through English in India,
Right.
and all the subjects, physics, chemistry, maths, applied maths, and all of those. So when I came here to do sixth year, I had completed the Indian Leaving Cert equivalent and actually it was like repeating Leaving Cert as
All
opposed
right.
to taking on. I guess the only challenge I had was doing the English because it was a very different standard, despite the fact that I'd studied through English.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think a lot of us probably even struggle to English, and we live in an English-speaking country. So there we go. So fair play to you. Well done. So okay, so you've got your degree in engineering. So what part of engineering sort of is enticing you to get involved in?
So I chose electronic engineering in when I got into first year in UCD. Again, the choice was relatively clear to me, and that it was going to be electronics.
Right.
So yeah, after from second year onwards, I specialized in electronic engineering, studying everything about semiconductors and circuits, or as I like to call it sometimes, civil engineering at the nanoscale.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, civil engineering at the nanoscale. Yeah, like that. So obviously, now that you've got through university, the onus is on you to go and find a job that pays you for your knowledge. So where was that likely to prop up?
So actually, in my final year in UCD, I went to a careers fair late 2000. Did interviews with Xilinx. They're based in City West, headquartered in San Jose.
All right.
And I had a job offer before I even got into the last semester of my final year. And thankfully, despite the dot-com bubble burst, I managed to keep the job offer and started with them in October 2001.
Well, it says something about them because there was an absolute catastrophe for so many companies around that in technology at that time.
Yeah, and lots of my friends from college, their job offers were rescinded. They chose to go traveling or find other ways of getting employment or taking years out. I guess I was one of the lucky ones and kept the job.
Hmm. And what do you think was their success that sort of helped them survive in a particularly sort of tough environment?
So the CEO at the time decided to Wim Rollins. He's a Belgian American. He put together a policy of everybody taking pay cuts from the top down all the way,
Good, okay.
ranging from 20% at the top. 15 or 20% for himself, all the way down to 3% to day-to-day employees, I guess.
Right.
Uh, and cost cutting measures, and enforced holiday sounds negative, but so everybody shouldered the burden, and
Right.
that's how they
Okay.
managed to keep stay afloat.
Had they many employees?
At the time, they had about 2,500 globally, and 200 odd of them were based in Dublin and City West.
Well, it's a fair size organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly to manage them in that way, okay, so they've managed to survive and thrive. And what was their speciality?
So Xilinx was the company that introduced an FPGA to the world way back in 1984. FPGA stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. For anybody that knows something about technology, gate array is essentially the building blocks of computer chips.
Right.
They're arrays of silicon gates that control the flow of electricity and decision-making circuits. What they did different from any other company was they made them reprogrammable.
All right.
So, I mean, normally when you take, for example, the Intel Pentium processor, once it's built in, designed into silicon and built, it can only do a certain number of things. Now, it's a large array of things it can do in our computers, but essentially it runs a particular set of software. Whereas the FPGAs, what they do is you can actually just reconfigure the circuits to do a whole array of things. So the families of FPGAs that I worked on was a Spartan family, primarily throughout my 9.5-year career with them. And they were used in applications all the way from DVD players to Gibson guitars.
All right.
Because they allowed, so, in a DVD player at that time, we had 6 different regions around the world, and you needed different coding methods. So
Right.
with this single chip, you could have the same DVD player shipped to 6 different areas once programmed
right.
correctly.
All
So,
right.
it was a viable, it made lots of things viable like that.
Right. I won't probe further into the technology. I can feel myself glassing over here once you get into it. So anyway, listen, obviously a huge amount of experience there working within a large organization. What about progression there? Or, how did you find it? Because obviously the main body of people were in the States. Did you get the opportunity to travel and meet them?
I did. Actually, I was only in the company about 3 weeks, and they were starting a new body of work that hadn't been done in Ireland. So they sent a new guy over to get trained,
All right.
and one senior engineer as well. But it gave me great exposure to the bigger, wider team in San Jose, and I got to work with some very senior engineers out there and learn new skills. Right. And then after that, we started training some people in a new site in Albuquerque 4 years after that. So I was sent over to train them, and I was there in Albuquerque for about 12 weeks then.
Yeah, New Mexico. How did you find that?
Hot, despite being Indian. No, I didn't have a driver's license when I was in Albuquerque. So
Really?
I
All
stayed
right.
in a hotel very close to the office. So there was a lot of walking, which a lot of people found very strange.
Right.
But no, it was very hot in Albuquerque, but I made some good friends.
Yes, of course.
Most of the team was similarly aged to myself. So I made some great friends, and had a fantastic time for 11 weeks.
Yeah, I'd say you did. It must have been quite interesting. They're looking at you coming from India, but has more sort of Irish behaviors in terms of heat and things like that. It must
Yeah,
have been quite fascinating.
definitely. One of the things that stands out in my mind is the language and the Irish slang that you pick up, and definitely had a lot of fun with that.
Oh, I'd say you did, and you had to be careful as well in case you were arrested for some of it. Yeah, they're a bit funny
Yes.
like that in America. All right, that's interesting. So, obviously, you'd spent quite some time, nearly short of 10 years in Xilinx, but something else sort of beckoned you. You got a motivation to move on.
Yeah. So when I started engineering, my long-term plan in my career was to work 4 or 5 years as an engineer, and then
Right.
and do business masters in business, and then move on to more business-based roles.
Sure.
So in the latter half of my career in Xilinx, when I wasn't getting the opportunities, and the opportunity to move between teams was limited as well, I got a chance to take a redundancy and just kind of refocus my career goals.
Right.
So I took a career break for 6 months and thought about my options. And
All right.
yeah,
And so where did you decide to think about your options?
um, so I got an opportunity. So at late 2011 was the time when social media marketing was really picking up and search engine optimization. And I already always had exposure to websites within Xilinx. I'd done internal websites and managed internal forums and everything. So I did a digital marketing internship
Sure.
in Balbriggan with an Irish company for 9 months. Gave me a taste for digital marketing and websites and how I could help businesses, small medium enterprises particularly. So I started Xava in November 2012.
Right. I suppose the question I was really getting to, so you had to go and find yourself for 6 months in the Caribbean. I'm sure that must have been an awful chore for you.
Oh, it was, but I put myself through it.
Why not? Why not do that? All right. So suddenly we're into digital marketing. Tell me about the landscape back in sort of 2011 about digital marketing. What were they doing then that has changed so fundamentally today?
Well, actually, the biggest thing I found at that time was smaller businesses particularly hadn't even thought of getting online or selling online, even in 2011. And I don't know, Alec, if you remember, but the broadband penetration wasn't that great.
Hmm.
And so it quickly moved a step backwards, I guess, in a way, from digital
Right.
marketing to getting people online, so websites. So my tagline at that time was be be present, be social, be found.
All
The
right.
idea was to focus on the be social and be found for businesses, but I ended up focusing more on the be present bit.
Right.
And I got to learn a lot along the way and how small businesses work and how it could help them.
Okay, I mean it's one thing to come through university and the formal educational system, then to go and work with a large company, but it's something completely different to go off and found your own company, Xavier, in 2012. Tell us about the decision making around that process and how did you go about it?
Um, so I I just wanted to work for myself. I wanted to try it out. Was the first thing.
Hmm.
And then I had my interest in websites and digital marketing, and I had exposure to WordPress. I'd been using it for my own as a hobbyist for about 8 years at that point, from version 1 onwards. So
Right.
I married the three, and it kind of came together by accident. I had a couple of relatives of friends who needed business websites, and they came to me, and there was a bit of organic growth from there. And I decided to formalize it and call it Xava, and so that I could send people proper invoices and
Mm.
then carve out a living from it thereon.
Where did you find the name Zeva?
Um, it's a long time ago. It was purely accidental.
All right.
Um, honestly, I was drinking Java coffee at the time, and just replaced the J with X because I worked in Xilinx. That was the thought process at the time. Uh,
Good a reason as any.
it was, but what it has helped me with is people ask me, what does Ava do? It's not related to websites, it's not related to anything.
Sure.
So it gets me the first 30 seconds that I need with a lot of clients.
Sure. So let's sort of move on from that. So you've started that. Primarily, what was your audience? Who were you targeting?
I was targeting small family owned businesses with, I guess the slang term may be mom and pop businesses, as the
Sure.
Americans would call it, and try and really convince them to start trading online and selling online. Um, and ironically, one of the biggest challenges I faced at that time was being able to accept credit cards because we didn't even have Stripe back then.
Right. All right. Well, it took an Irish family to set that one up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, sorry.
No, 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 no. Fine. I was just fascinating. So, I mean, if you're trying to, sorry, I'll have to edit that bit. You're okay. Somebody trying to get through to me. I'll edit that bit out. Don't worry. I've been plagued today, believe it or not, by people with these sort of spurious calls. But anyway, let me edit that piece out. I'll just take a
No worries.
break for a second. Okay, so back to small family businesses. Let's talk about um, why them? Why did you feel that there was a marketplace for them?
So I'm very good at communicating with people. I'm very, very good at talking to people
Hmm.
and helping them understand, well, technical stuff.
Yeah.
And I had a taste of that in throughout my internship and throughout the initial days of Xava when I was helping friends, families, businesses. And they all said how, I made it simpler for them to understand, or I took something off their plate. I didn't have to worry about it compared with their previous web guy or whatever. So it was about that, but also the decision-making process can be a lot quicker in a smaller
Sure.
business compared with some of the larger businesses. And I also saw that as a journey for myself, that you do a lots of smaller businesses, establish the name Xava so I can target the bigger clients further down the road.
Right. I suppose in terms, there must have been also a lot of skepticism from people because this is a totally new marketplace. They understand very little about it.
Yes, I spent a lot of time and energy convincing people about how they could benefit, or the conversation that I remembered from back then. Why don't we put all your team on the website, and they're worried about that somebody will poach them.
Right.
So lots of educational conversations with lots of people.
Yeah. No, it must have been interesting. Um, and again, you're into a new marketplace, selling for them virtually a new product, if I can use the pun there.
Yeah.
Um, how how did you get that across to them?
Persistence
All right. It's a
and
good word as
and
any.
and honesty.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I had found, again, in the early days of Xava, was people complained about not having enough control over their website.
Sure.
So for me, a website is like a physical store.
Right.
You wouldn't let somebody else sign the lease. You wouldn't let somebody else make decisions on what products you're going to put up there, how the shelving is going to look, or whatever
Yes, of
your
course. Yeah.
requirements may be. Yet here we were with their websites, people were giving that control away.
All right. Right.
And it still happens. I still meet clients who don't know how to get into their hosting, or they can't edit the files or something. Actually, only 3 weeks ago, I helped a client move their website from their previous provider to a new hosting company. And one of the questions they asked me is, can you not host it for us? I said, no, because this is your website and you control everything. And
Sure.
you employ me to work on it, not own it for you.
Yes.
And, so that kind of honesty was the other reason I got business.
It's an amazing challenge for people because there's a huge amount of technology behind it. I know from my own, I have it hosted and I've been in on my own dashboard. My God, it's a world of its own. I stay away from it as much as
Yeah.
possible.
And you know what? In the long run, when you open all of this up to people and they realize how much work there is, I actually get more work out of them
Yeah, yeah.
because they
I,
understand the value behind it then.
yeah. Well, I think what you have to do is often talk tech language in a simple way that people can understand.
Yeah. And I always rely on analogies. So just like I did with the physical store and the website, that's how I simplify it for people and help them understand. So recently I did a workshop on search engine optimization, and
Sure.
how do you explain to somebody that you get a very little time or attention from the prospective customer who's searching on Google? I went around the table and gave them 15 seconds or 20 seconds to introduce themselves. And
Yes.
after 20 seconds, I muted them out because we were doing them on Zoom.
Yes.
And 90% of the people were left frustrated because they didn't get across what they wanted to. So that really clarified for them how little time they have in grabbing a prospective customer's attention.
Well, I think you've identified something that most companies, and I'd say from my experience as well, actually, if you ask them, can you sum up in a sentence or two exactly what you do? They can't do it.
No, they struggle.
Hmm.
If you're producing widgets, they're very, very good at producing widgets. If they design children's games, they'll be very good at it. They'll be very good at the drawing and whatever. And then you stand, and myself included at the beginning. I know I met you a few times in Dublin Chamber networking events, and I used to
Yes.
feel really uncomfortable. But I,
Well,
just
thanks
went
very
out
much. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable.
there. No, talking about yourself is hard.
Yes, of course it is. Of course it is.
So I did it. I did it
Mm.
because fundamentally I believe that people that I worked with, the businesses that I worked with, I could help them get more out of their websites. And that's what I'm still doing.
Yeah, and I think there's a great tip there. If you have a business and you can't sum it up in two sentences, less than 20 seconds, what you do, you need to certainly do that exercise
Yeah,
and make it relevant to the audience that you've got there.
exactly.
I know that you use WordPress as your main platform. Tell me about that and why that decision, because you read so much press to, for, and against it sort of thing.
Yeah. So way back in 2004 and 5, I was looking to start up an online community for Indians in Ireland.
Okay,
And so I knew what I wanted for my website. I knew I needed a forum where people could discuss things. I knew and wanted a website where I could advertise events and stuff like that. So I was evaluating 3 different platforms for actually, sorry, Magento, Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress.
mm,
Magento was too complex. It did everything I wanted, but it was too complex. It was never going to be simple. So I
sure,
moved on to Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress very quickly and shortlisted to WordPress just because it was, even back then, I found it easy to understand, which meant that it would be easier for me to explain to anybody. Not that I was intending to do a business back then. I was still working for Xilinx, but I did use it for internal websites where
right,
I set up internal forums for us to share tips and tricks on circuit development and stuff. So along the way, I dug into the code. I messed with it. I read loads
mm,
of blogs, followed the originators of WordPress, and learned a lot along the way. And so it has stuck since then. Um,
right,
and for the for and against, look, it's a bit like Microsoft Windows.
yeah,
It's the biggest. If it becomes a biggest platform, it is going to be the most talked about. So you'll hear a lot more about it. That's one thing, but also it's going to be targeted the most as well.
sure,
Uh, but equally, by the same logic, there's the most number of developers for it.
right.
So you
So
you
there's a
get a
lot
lot of
of,
support
yeah,
as well.
yeah, so lots of pros and cons, and of course, then they would have certainly the financial clout to be updating it on a regular basis in
Yeah,
terms of security and that.
yeah, and actually, WordPress is managed by essentially volunteers. Even though the guy who first wrote WordPress owns a very big company called Automatic, which do WooCommerce and Jetpack, 2 very big names in the WordPress ecosystem.
Right,
But WordPress itself is free
right.
and developed by volunteers who go through it and contribute updates and modules and it's a well-run community, if you look at it, and
All right.
the ins and outs.
Let's just talk for a few minutes because we've about three and a half minutes left. What are the most common mistakes people make when they go about having a website commissioned for themselves?
So for one of the first things that I've already alluded to is that they give control away without
Okay,
intending to.
right.
And I talked about it, so I'll move on. The other thing is, especially at the SME level and at starter business, and maybe the first upgrade level, a lot of people cannot distinguish between the needs and the wants for the
Sure.
business. That's where I help them translate the needs from the wants. So everybody wants bells and whistles and for their website to look really good,
Yep.
but you have to understand what their customers need,
Yes.
and then try and find the minimum viable set of design business related goals that you want to meet, because development and managing of these websites takes money and time, whether it's mine or the business owners, doesn't matter, but at the end
Yep.
of the day it needs an investment.
Yes.
So and any business, for it to grow effectively, you know you can't wait for everything to be perfect and then launch the website. You'll never
Yep.
launch it. You'll never be perfect. So distinguishing the needs from the wants is one thing. Then last is the content for the website.
Sure.
I'm working with many clients whose websites structurally designed sit idle for 3 to 6 months because they haven't the content written,
Wow.
and they insist on writing it themselves, and then they
Mm.
struggle, and then they realize how much work there is. So the content would be the third leg of that,
Yeah,
stool.
and content is made up of text and images.
A bit more than that. It's what makes the emotional connection with your audience. So, it has to hit the right notes, but essentially text and images. Yes.
Yes, obviously you
Sorry.
have to write something that's relevant and engages
Yeah.
the audience. It's interesting that the number of people, and I know from my own experience in the past that because I've seen it, not a too dissimilar sector, and the number of people who want a website commission but actually have nothing. They've a broad idea and
Mm.
then want to plow on ahead, which is a route to disaster generally.
Oh, yeah. Or the other one is designed by committee, which is also a route to disaster. But considering we have a small amount of time left, I'll focus on the first one. And on my website, what I have is I've digitized my intake form, which is I used to call it the creative briefing. Now it's a website planning tool
Right.
where I get people to go through lots of different things.
Yeah.
Some of them include, do you understand the importance of color and color combinations? Or are there other stakeholder decision makers in the project? What kind of personality would you like to see on the website? But the most important question I have in that form is I get them to define their customers that the website is going to try and target.
Wow. And I suppose if people want to find out more about Xavier and yourself, Amit, where's the best place they can do that?
The best place to do that is on xava.ie, xava.ie.
Right.
And they can go get in touch with